What is the difference between being punk and being a punk?
We are here to talk some punk rock, some music, comics,
punk culture, DIY shit, anything we want to talk about.
That's what fascinates me. Give me everything. Absolutely everything.
I find that music and comics have always been intertwined.
Muckspout.
Chicks dig it. Don't worry.
Hey, welcome to Muckspout, everybody. Today we got Ben with me as almost always, and
Almost.
and Lawrence Lindell, who I actually have an intro written for. I did not get it approved by him, so let's hope this goes well. Lawrence Lindell is an accomplished zine creator, artist, and writer based in Long Beach, California. Did I get that right?
Nah.
Ah, dang it. He is known for his impactful zines that touch on a variety of topics, including mental health, social justice, and personal growth. Lawrence's work is deeply personal and often draws from his own experiences, offering readers a relatable and authentic perspective on the world around us. The rest of it was pretty spot on. I know that just from reading some. So, man, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, our podcast, we talk right at the front. We say we're here to talk about punk, comics, DIY, and music, and that's like you sum up a bunch of that, if not all of that. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was just talking to a buddy of mine today about how entrepreneurship is kind of a personality trait more than it is a career path. You know what I mean? How like you have to, certain brains just come up with a lot of ideas and have to like implement them in some way. And all the people I've known that have like run their own business or kind of done their own thing in life, whether that's artistic or any other kind of field, they have this like it's like a force that's like pulling them wherever they're going, and they just have to execute. They have to try these new things. They have no choice. And you seem to be kind of like right in that vein. Everything you do is like you're putting your own stamp on your own shit. Like, do you work for anybody or do you just do your own thing?
Yeah, no. For the last 10 years, I've done the kind of self-published DIY, but I also do stuff with the New Yorker. And then
very cool.
Coming out with Drawn and Quarterly. So it's like I'm fortunate enough to live in both of those worlds.
Yeah.
And most of those worlds also came from like Drawn and Quarterly started kind of like independently.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, there might be big now, but it's kind of the same, like same mentality.
Right.
That's why I like working with them, because it's not like, okay, make these comics and let's make a bunch of money. It's like, all right, we love comics. We have a bigger platform.
Yeah.
Are you interested in working with us? And I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get connected with them? Did they contact you, or were you just interested and, paths got crossed or something like that?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, everyone knows about D&Q because of comics, but I met them at Small Press Expo, and then I pitched to them and they didn't respond. And then I did a comic thing here in the Bay called the Baileys, and they were a fan of that. And then I pitched to them again. They were like, "Oh, we're so sorry we didn't see your pitch the first time. We're glad we get to work with you now." And I think it's better because it's like if I would have did it when I first wanted to do it, I don't think it would have came out the way this book came out. So, yeah.
So how did it evolve between pitches, so to speak?
It's based off of a webcomic I did called Section. And basically I had so much done already that they were like, oh yeah, we could see this being, I keep looking because the computer's here, but the camera's here. So I keep looking, thinking I'm looking at you, but I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at
That's all good.
But yeah, so I had so much content, like the story was already built over the last 2018, 19, 20, 20, 4 years. So it was like putting into a book was like, oh yeah, of course. Like, yeah.
That's
right.
awesome.
Very cool.
So, anybody watching this right now like is familiar with my work, and I sat next to Lawrence at Chicago Zine Fest like 6 years ago, and I had a book that actually I had drawn a blister story in my blister comic, and at the time that was the only blister comic material there was. I was sitting later in the show; it was kind of slow, so we were chatting a bit, and he was looking through there, and Lawrence looked at that story, and he said, "If you had a book of this, I would want that." And I was like, "Huh." I wanted to do a book of that, but like no, I didn't have like that push, and I don't know that I would have probably done it anyways had that not happened. But I think Lawrence gave me a nice boost there, and that was one thing that I really appreciated about getting to know him at all during that small time was that his positivity was, and it's prevalent in his work, I think, which is something that helps him stand out when you look at his work.
Yeah.
So
it seems like what you're doing is very honest in a way that like comics tend to be very like kind of rooted in suspension of disbelief to some degree. You know, it's like people flying and shooting lasers out of their eyes and shit. But you're using it in a more personal and kind of autobiographical way, I guess. So, you know, and you do speak a lot about mental health. So we've talked about this in the past, but just it seems like art is probably the healthiest form of therapy that people can pursue. And I was wondering how comics ended up becoming your outlet for this sort of therapeutic exercise.
Yeah, it's funny because I started off as a drummer in a lot of
Oh,
punk
no
and
shit.
hardcore bands. Yeah,
Dude.
so I do music and comics. I still do music, but comics just lends itself to me easier than being in a band or like it's
Sure.
yeah. But I made 2 comics and they're titled "Couldn't Afford Therapy," so it was almost like a no choice. You know what I mean? Like it was like
Right.
it was like I couldn't afford it, and I was like, well, I got to do something, and I was like, I draw comics. Let me see how this works with handling my mental health. And it actually turned out to be a very like positive and healthy way. Like it's stuff that it's funny because therapists use my comics in their therapy sessions. So
There you go, man.
it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I was onto something, and they'll tell me like, yeah, keep going with this. Like even if you can't afford it, like this is something that we use in the practice, so you're on the right track. Yeah, it just came out of necessity. Yeah,
I'm gonna guess that most of the time, if somebody's being talked about in somebody else's therapy session, it's not a good thing. So kudos to you.
Yeah. Well, the way they broke it down to me was like their patient brought a page from my comic and was like, "This is what I feel. This is what I'm trying to explain to you." So it's just the power that we have as artists to kind of paint these pictures that other people might not be able to, or some shit like that. I don't know, but yeah, like
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You know, it's cool because like I remember I was like an early adopter of Facebook back in like the university days, but like I also remember outside. You know, like when you would stay out until the lights were on. I also remember that shit. So like it's fascinating seeing how language has evolved and changed where like memes have become more of the language than the actual words. And there's something like unique about a comic book where it's this. I've always felt like comics are the perfect form of like storytelling because a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm a writer. I'll fully admit it. You know, like you could do it way faster. You know what I mean? And marrying the two is just almost a perfect art form. All it needs is like a backing track.
well,
you know,
there's like I don't want to say it's a movement, but kind of like a not not like a visual comics, but there's like people making soundtracks to their comics. But like it's like an I don't know how to explain it because it's not fully formed yet. That's what I love about comics. Is like everybody's experimenting with stuff, but
Right.
I feel like that's coming real soon. Like the backing track to the comics with the words, and yeah.
I actually had that in mind when I wrote my comic. I created a playlist on Spotify to go with, and I would play it over and over as I was writing it. And then I kind of distilled it down to like 4 or 5 tracks that would like last the entirety of you flipping through the pages. And it seemed appropriate, but then I was like, how am I gonna market this? And I was already trying to figure out how to crowdfund a fucking comic. So I was like, I'll do this another day. But yeah, it seems like that's another like layer of this you could add for sure. Have you thought about doing that, like incorporating music into your work?
So I've been the Blackbird, which is the book that's coming out with John Corley. I've been scoring it, kind of, if you will.
Cool.
But I'm trying to figure out how to, put it together where it's not just like a low budget version of animation or like, it's not. Yeah, I haven't figured it out yet because it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Only a few people have done it, and I don't know if it's successful. I feel like it is because they tried it out, but you're like it's still up in the air right now, kind of like how to actually make it all work.
Have you explored Adobe, the puppet one? I've been playing with it, the character animator from Adobe. Oh, check that one out. It's pretty cool. I've been playing with that with animating Blister a little bit, and it's fun.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that stuff. Like, how do you guys, because I'm not an artist. That's like the one thing I have no talent in at all.
You're a writer and a drummer. You're for sure an artist.
Yeah.
Even if it's not quote unquote visual, but like, I mean,
yeah,
what you paint with, especially with as a biased person, as a drummer. Like,
yeah, I meant it that way, but thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. I think I was discouraged when I was a kid from the visual side of things. And so I kind of like sunk my teeth into music, and then writing kind of came after. But I've always been curious and like fascinated by like, how do you picture what you're doing and get it on the page? Because like writing, I can do that. It'll take 30 pages, but I can do it. Whereas you guys just lay it out and then it's there. It's fascinating to me. Do you know how you do it?
Yeah, I was gonna see if Eric wanted to.
No, I'm gonna defer to you.
Yeah, no, it depends on what you're making. So the thing about comics is like you could be as literal as you want to, or you don't have to be as literal as you want to. So the 30 pages you wrote, kind of in prose or whatever you want to call it, I could maybe turn that into one single panel depending on how descriptive you are in those 30 pages, or if it's necessary to have everything in the panel. I love comics because you don't actually need to know how to draw to make good comics. It's something that people think like just because you can draw, you can make comics. It's like illustration and comics are two very different things. They lend
very much
to each other, but there's plenty of comics who are very successful using stick figures. Because it's not it's a visual language, but it's hard to describe because people hear it and be like, what are you talking about? There's inkers and pencilers and colorists, and it's like, yeah, that's a part of comics, but I can make some very brilliant comics with stick figures and like expressions and words.
Yeah.
And it's still successful.
I can think of a couple off the top of my head.
It's about the language of comics and not just the visual aesthetic, which a lot of people fall like into, like thinking they can draw, so that means you make good comics. And it's like, you just made a pretty picture, which is cool, but that's not necessarily a great comic.
Yeah, I'll argue all the time. Like there's sometimes people will be like, I think that the inside artist should do the cover. And those are two different skill sets. Being able to draw a beautiful illustration. You definitely don't want it to stray too far, and you can do both. But there's people that like would be almost upset that the cover artist wasn't the interior artist. And like I'm not a great cover artist. I like doing the interior narrative work, but so there's just a lot of different decisions at play there.
Yeah, well, there's a musical parallel as well, right? Like I play drums, but I also play hand drums. I know a lot of drummers that are like just beasts on the kit, but when they watch me with a djembe, they're like, hold on, how did you do that? Like they start tapping away and they get it for a second, but like it's not as intuitive, you know?
Yeah. And there's certain things to think about too with comics, like the page turn reveals sometimes.
Right. Yeah, the narrativization of the picture.
Yeah, some people are hardcore about that. I like to use it, at certain times, so maybe to catch you off guard more. And yeah, just when I start to lay out a page, I'll think about what's going to be the striking, and where do I want my eye to be led, and there's a lot of decision making that goes on, like behind the scenes. I guess it probably looks a lot more simple in the end.
So do you kind of picture it semi fully formed in advance and then just like kind of reveal it to yourself, or does it start as a sketch and it kind of like an improv kind of thing?
Yeah, for me, I'll do some quick thumbnails. I'll start with stick figures, I guess, on another piece of paper, and then get it all laid out, and then go in a little further.
What about you, Lawrence?
Yeah, for me, it depends on what I'm making. So if I'm doing like a diary comic, it's irrelevant because it's just the diary. When I do like mental health comics, it depends on what I'm talking about. For Blackbird, I use the source material from the webcomic as like kind of, all right, well, this is where the story is going and how do I want to fill that in. For my editor, I did rough drafts, not really thumbnails, but like rough draft pages. And we spent a lot of time on that portion of it before we even went into making, which was different for me because, I just do what I want. So I'm like,
right,
what is this? Like, but I appreciate her because she allowed me so much time to really get every single idea I wanted out. So when I executed the final book, it was nearly perfect, which is rare. Like, I don't really care about being perfect. I just want the feeling on the page. But this was a different experience where it's like I got the feeling and it was like, damn, like I really made this. Like, like I'm super proud of just everything I've learned about comics. I put into this kind of book, and it was nice to finally work with the editor that I like, that kind of just loves comics and was there to support me, as opposed to be like, all right, we need a book that'll cater to whoever and whoever. It was just like, all right, what's your vision? I was like, it's this. And she was like, all right, let me help you get to that vision. And I heard like that's what a good editor is, but I had never experienced that before. So yeah, this is my first time being like, oh, this is what people are talking about.
So how much does that story change from the webcomic to the book? Like, is it moments that are different, but it's still the same sort of complete picture, or how does that?
Yeah, so the webcomic was an idea I had, and a page was drawn a day. So there was no thumbnails, no planning. It was ink colored, written, and posted the same day. So whatever I wanted to experiment with, I just put on the page in 24 hours, and then I put it up, and people just happened to like it. With Blackbird, I kind of like went into the characters' lives and that type of thing, and it's the same though. I really do feel like it's the same. I feel like it's what the section would have been, which is what the webcomic is called, if it wasn't meant to be like a spontaneous experiment thing. Yeah. So it's like all that experimenting led to, the final product, which is Blackbird, which is, I think, is the best way to make art. Is like, don't try to make it perfect. Just experiment and see like how can I pull out. Even with music, like especially with music, but music lends itself to improvisation, so it's a little different than.
It's more in the moment.
Yeah, like so. Yeah. You want that in music, and people will even like kind of like, oh wow, do you see what they did there? In comics, they're like, what are you doing? We don't like that. Go back to the stuff we know. And music is like, oh damn, did you hear that note? Well, I never heard it played. So I want comics to be more like that in terms of like improv and like experimenting and stuff.
Comics are so much work too. Like there's like every one of them is a huge project. So like there's a point where in your head you have to get to the point of I need it finished, not perfect. Like, so it's cool that you got to finish it and then go back and perfect it. So I'm like, That's cool.
Yeah, that sort of improv mentality, bringing that to comics, that is, now that I think about it, it didn't really cross my mind until you said it, but that is something seriously lacking in the comic world kind of ethos, I would say, is like we're just having fun, guys. Like this, we don't have to make everything about, a particular storyline or a character that has to be retained in some way. Like all that stuff, it's mythology. We're just having fun. We're just
That's
making cool shit.
Yeah, often I'll tell people that so mine and Ben's world and our mutual friends and stuff in the indie comics community, a lot of it is people trying to audition for Marvel or something, essentially.
Yeah.
And I'm telling people all the time that if you go to the Artist Alley at C2E2 or Emerald City or whatever, and you go look at those indie comic creators, and then you step out of that world and you go to a zine fest, you're going to see really independent people making some bizarre shit, some just the most amazing off the wall like stuff, and some of the most genuine stuff. But you're also going to see 100 times the amount of people that you saw at the Artist Alley. Like it's so much bigger. And I know that's the world that Lawrence is living in often. It's a cool one. Like you want to speak to that a little bit, the zine fest mentality.
Yeah, it's weird. I've never actually been to so I've attended Comic-Con, but I've never I don't vend at Comic-Con. I've never done these big ones where it's like, oh yeah, I hope somebody from Marvel sees me. It's like that's the furthest thing from. So it's like to hear, I know very well. So I grew up on superhero comics. I'm not just
right.
Oh, I'm an indie. No, I fucking love the Hulk, and that's what I grew up on. But I make independent and coming from punk and hardcore, indie comics lend itself to what I was already used to with zines and releasing your own music and making your own label. It makes sense to me. So auditioning at an Artist Alley for someone to be like, oh, I like your work, in a few years, hit me back up. It's like, no, I don't have a few years. I'm gonna do it right now. So I'm not used to that kind of world. I usually do zine fest. I don't even SPX was probably the biggest comic thing that I've been to. I just hit up zine fest for years. That was that's what I know.
Could you describe the difference?
It's funny because essentially they all started the same way. Comics was very indie. That was comics, fanzines and all that stuff. It's the same culture, but somehow there's been this weird shift, I guess.
Well, it's the same thing happened to punk rock, right? And 70s, 60s, 80s, it was this underground thing. It was for very specific kind of personality that was you wanted to be a seeker of the underground to find it, because it wasn't being played on the radio and it wasn't happening in the big venues and that kind of shit. And then somewhere along the way it became mainstream, and then there was this and then there was two different tracks that things followed. And I see a similar thing happening with hip hop right now in certain ways as well.
Yeah, it's weird because it's maybe back in the day, when I was younger, I'm mainstream, fuck all that. Now it's whatever. I don't care. Do what you want to do. I don't care. Your life's your life. But just don't forget, they've convinced us somehow that you have to publish it this way, or you have to release music this way. And it's we've already proven that you don't have to do that.
Yes.
And that's the difference I see at Zine Fest. Is no one was there asking hey, can I make this zine? It was yeah, I made a zine and I put it on the table. Did you want to buy it or do you want to walk away? It was
yeah. Totally.
And so I feel some comic conventions, they kind of bring in that kind of mentality of oh, I might meet a publisher. And it's yeah, you might meet a publisher here, but don't be there for that reason, because one, you're gonna get disappointed because most of them aren't really checking for everyone on the floor. But two is this is your opportunity to make the thing you want to make and be proud of that. Put it on the table. Maybe 3 people buy it. So what? You did something. And then next time you'll do more. And then we find each other. Eric and I just happened to sit next to each other at a zine fest. That's the only reason I'm here. It's not because I'm special.
Right.
We had a good conversation and he remembered me and I remembered him. And it was that, that's what it is.
That's
So I try to push
that's
that
an
towards
authentic
people.
experience. Like, yeah, it's more real. I've always felt like, and you know, we have the same thing in the music world too, where there's people who are like, oh, we just got to get signed to a label. We just got to get signed to a label. And I've always felt like it's like every time you get on the bus, you're looking for a millionaire. Like, just relax. Just keep doing what you're doing. If you're good, it'll work out, you know, or you'll at least enjoy yourself. That's the thing for me with music and comics is like, I just love doing it. It's its own reward. It doesn't have to be this big, you know, I don't need to win an award to feel like it was worth my time.
And a lot of people will overanalyze, like, I have this idea, but is it going to sell? And you get a lot less of that in the zine community, which I love. Like, I was walking through the aisles of Chicago Zine Fest, one of the last ones they did before COVID, and the logo for the band Jawbreaker caught my eye on this zine, and I was like, what is that? I love Jawbreaker. Like, I got to look at this. Turned out that it was somebody compiled Blake from Jawbreaker had written all these video game reviews in like the 90s just to make a buck on the side. And somebody compiled all of those into a zine. And it was just such a weird specific, like video games and Jawbreaker. I loved both of those things. So like, that nailed me. But like, what percentage of people, like if you really analyzed that and put that out, like you might.
Yeah, if you were trying to like do market research on that shit, it's like Eric.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's one of the things I love, like the chances that are taken in the zine community is one of the things I love.
Yeah, you never know. You might come up with, like, I'm not unrealistic. Like, I'm passionate, but people gotta pay bills. Like, I don't pretend like I don't know people have to make a living. That's just not the world we live in. That's what it is. But it's the idea that you should just make what you want to make, because more than likely you're not gonna make a lot of money from it anyways. Like, we get paid shit. Like, if you want to be honest about it.
Break down those hours, you'll start crying.
So you might as well make the thing you want to make, you know, if money is your end objective, because it's not, you know, that's rare, very rare to be this millionaire from comics or even music. Like, that's a rare thing. So you might as well make what you want to make. And then sometimes you being allowed to make what you want to make leads you to like this gym. And I don't even mean money. I just mean like how I feel like, oh man, I made this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But I'm realistic. I got a baby, I got a family, so you know, you gotta eat. Yeah. So it's I'm never just like, oh yeah, passion only. Is like within reason. Like you need to. Do you have a regular job, or you know, like just kind of like I just want to throw that in there, because sometimes, like, you know, we get passionate because we love it for sure, but it's like also here are ways that you can eat as well without like messing up your integrity, if you will. So.
Totally.
Yeah, I know people that like really hustle in comics, and I admire their want to make a living in comics, and some people do. I worked towards a job that I actually love, so I can do comics because I have this job and I can make my living outside of it. Like, but there's so many ways to go about that, and I have some respect for all of it.
Yeah, I guess that, you know, that's really the thing that I think about with, if, for example, you want to be an artist at Marvel or a writer at Marvel, or you want to be signed to Sub Pop or Interscope, like those aren't unreasonable goals necessarily. That what you're saying is you want to be great and you want to be recognized, of course. But I think the thing is, if you think talking to an executive or talking to an editor or something like that is the route to that, that's you're missing the actual process of like making the stuff you love, figuring out what works, trying to develop like a plan for yourself, and in terms of like how you can do something that you genuinely love and also not, you know, eat mac and cheese every day for the rest of your life. You know, there are ways to do it, but it is an experimental process. You have to let yourself kind of fall in the mud a couple times and clean yourself off.
And chances
people are trying to find a little shortcut. That might be the issue.
It's true. Chances are, if you make your own thing and you have your own fan base, those people you want to work with are more likely to work with you anyways because they want to
Right.
cash in on whatever you're bringing, which
Hmm.
I would say, like, if you're able to do it yourself, do it yourself. But also if you need to check, I'm just not. I used to be so idealistic when I was younger. It was like, yeah, this is punk rock, hardcore. We do it ourselves, blah blah blah. And I was like, I'm hungry. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
It's hard to be so
Like,
independent when you're hungry all the time.
so there's ways, yeah, like experiment. Yeah, there's ways to go about it. Also, your life is your life. Like, it's cheesy to say,
Yeah.
but it's true. Like, I can't do what Eric's doing because I'm not living the same life Eric is living. So the way
Mhm.
we make comics, while they might intersect at times, I gotta do what's correct for however I need to live. And nobody can tell you how to do that. I can give you all the advice in the world. I still don't know your life. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Well, how do you walk that tightrope though? Like you personally.
Um, it's difficult. It's funny. I only did the D&Q deal because I wanted to bring in extra money. Ironically, for my family, my spouse, we found out that she was pregnant, and I was like, "Well,
Mm.
we need more money." And
That's very
yeah, it is, but it's also, I'm fortunate enough to be in a space where it's like more money meant going with the company that cared about my comic
Yeah.
and
Right.
that had a proper deal with royalties. So that means my book will be in print forever, and that's
Oh,
money
amazing.
that my child can eat off of. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
but it wasn't just like, oh yeah, this is a business decision. It was like, oh, I'm finally in a space where I could do something that I love and make a good decision financially, which is rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. To me that like connects directly with uh you know the work you do with on mental health. Because when I think about having to make someone else's art, like I already have a job that pays by the hour, you know, and the idea that I would be making someone else's work for free out of my, passion and talent, it 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 feels like I get depressed just thinking about it. And so like I wonder if your message of mental health could be so well delivered if it weren't for this like desire for personal autonomy and independence that you've like kind of carried yourself with. Do you see a connection there, or am I just kind of?
I don't know.
Because there's a level of honesty that needs to be there for you to be able to talk about these things. It's always very difficult to start the conversation.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it was like I think I just happened to work in a place where it's like people have been making comics about themselves forever. So,
Mm,
like, I made this mental health comic out of necessity, but also I have been putting out zines and like books and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, I guess this could be a book too. Uh, like,
mm-hmm.
I don't know, I would have made it no matter what because I needed to make it. But then it wasn't until I saw that people were like, oh yeah, like that's kind of what I go through, and I was like, oh, maybe I could put this, like how I was doing the other zines. Maybe I'll just put them out. Um,
Yeah.
it's weird. I don't know. I don't. It's not that I don't think about it, but it's just kind of like, well, I'm doing it, so.
Right.
And then I just have built up the skills over the years to have the capacity to like, all right, I know how to distribute it, put it out, and do a tour, and it just, yeah, I don't know, but I think I do the things like D&Q, New Yorker, and that stuff to offset when I do because my spouse and I run our own press, but it's not for money. Like we wouldn't make any money anyways, but it's not for money to begin with. It's so that we
Mm-hmm.
always have a space to do any kind of comic we want to do without having
Yeah.
to kind of worry about stuff. And most of those comics are like done under that press. Yeah.
So you own all the rights and it's completely published by you.
Yeah. So we kick it like super DIY. We print everything at home, fold, staple, ship. We
That's
make
a
the
lot of hats.
covers. Yeah, I mean, but we've been. I think it's like between the two of us, we're both cartoonists, but also my spouse has a degree in graphic design.
Oh wow.
I've been touring since 2012. Like we have this infrastructure that we built up that is just, is kind of just what we do. Um,
Right.
Again,
Yeah, it's
coming
very
from
organic.
punk and hardcore, it was just like coming from that scene and going into other things. It was weird how people felt they needed permission because I was surrounded by a bunch of kids that was like, "Oh, we're starting a label tomorrow. You want to be a part of it?" It's like, yeah, of course, yeah. It's like, "Oh, we're throwing a show in the pool." And then we're going to turn this into a backyard show tour. And it was like,
It's
that's
got to
where
empty the wet dry vac 3 more times and we're set.
but it was like, I don't know. It was just like a disconnect of like, what do you mean we gotta wait for? It's like, no, we're just gonna do it. Like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So how did you get connected into the hardcore scene? Was it like a family thing? Like, did you have an older brother or something?
It's funny because no and yes. So my uncle before me skated, was in like minor threat and all this stuff. But I didn't know that until I was an adult, so I had no idea. He never talked about it. But me, it was just like through friends. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I was coming straight from like very, very, very straight up, just like pro black hip hop. And then you might have like some Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that in there. And then a friend was like, "Hey, you want to come to this show?" I was like, "What is it?" It's like punk. I was like, "All right, whatever." And then I don't know, it just stuck. He even said, he was like, "When I introduced you to this, I never thought you would be the one that's like full on into it." And it just became my life. And it came at a time where it was like I was going down a road where the music gave me something a little more positive to do. Like that hardcore became like it for me. Like when I was young, I was like 14, and it's like, this is saving my life right now. And yeah.
You grew up
with it.
Did you grow up around the San Francisco area then?
Nah. So when you said Long Beach, I'm from Compton, but like LA, yeah.
Okay.
But we used to go to a lot of shows. We would have to travel to Orange County and like the Inland Empire because they had better like all music venues and stuff. A lot of them don't exist anymore, but yeah.
Cool.
So when you say that like it was a force for positivity in your life, but the argument I've heard from people who don't listen to heavy music is, how could you possibly be happy listening to someone scream in your ear? So like, what did you find helped you in a positive way to kind of like have a better outlook?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like we could talk shit all day. Punk hardcore is a lot of destructive, especially when I was
Certainly.
coming up. There was a lot of like, kind of like white nationalists and like hiding in it, and then later like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, that's fucking racist.
Yep.
But that's how they get. Anyways, we can talk about that another time. But it was.
I mean, just to be clear, we can talk about that anytime because like we had our own skinheads coming to our shows, man. We had to deal with our own shit, so I can relate.
But yeah, it was like I was young, but I was already drinking by the time I was 12. So when I got into hardcore, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's this thing called straight edge," and then we chill, but we don't do like drugs and stuff. And at the time, it was like it was good.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds stupid, but the pit was a way to get out like aggression as a young kid that had nowhere to like kind of let that out. And it was more positive than going out and doing some of the stuff I would have previously been doing. So like it looks stupid while I'm running around in a circle to people who don't know, but to me this is like saving my life and possibly other people's.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, the heaviness wasn't just like heaviness, and they were talking about stuff like these kids were talking about stuff like that mattered. Like it wasn't just like, yeah, we go skating, blah blah blah. There's a fair share of that, but it was like, no, here's how we're gonna feed people, food not bombs. Here's it was like all these things, and it was like, oh shit. Yeah.
There's especially the more political stuff. You can't, like, I always found that it was like a mixture of rage and like, we can fucking do this, that was like infused in me through the music, where it wasn't it was very rare that I'd listen to a punk song that had like a really strong political message, where I would walk away from it going, man, nothing's gonna change around here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It always had this like element of like, we are the future. We are the generation that will fix this, even if no one else listens to us. You know? And like here I am, 39. I'm still trying, doing what I can. You know?
But yeah, so I related, and then it relating coming from, like, you know, I'm already coming from a space where like my folks came from Mississippi to California. So I'm coming from a space of people, civil rights, and like, you know, like there's already this connection where punk is just an extension of all those things, whether they get credit for it or not. But that's where that stuff kind of comes from, those political things. And so I'm coming from this, but I'm not hearing it as a kid because, you know, this is like your uncle telling you, like, I don't want to hear that. But this kid that's only 2 years older than me screaming it in the music that I like is relating to me. So it's like, I'm getting, like, I don't know. It was just, there's a lot to take away from the scene, especially when it comes to doing it yourself. Like, it was just, I had never seen people just band together and just like, yeah, we're you know, we're gonna build this thing over here so people have shelter and they can eat. Like, it was, these are kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many people were involved in the scene that you were a part of? What was that?
It was a good time.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. You know, LA County's big, Orange County's big. So and then, but unfortunately there's like a divide coming up for me. So I'm 35. I was born in 88, so I came up in like, you know, later waves of punk.
Right.
And so there's like this divide between metal, punk, thrash, and like there was that going, which is stupid because it's like, oh, very similar.
Yeah. Shades of anger. Like, I don't know. Okay, I guess.
We were just talking last week about gatekeeping and punk, and there's a lot of that between the different genres and stuff.
So it was weird. So I was in a punk band. I played drums, but I was coming from like hardcore punk perspective. Our bass player was a traditional skinhead. Our singer was an anarcho punk kid, and then our rhythm guitarist was a crust kid. So like all four of us were from completely different scenes, but we're the kids that like each other, so that's why we're playing.
That's like together. A testament to like what punk really is. It's like we all have our own clique, but we're also a clique of cliques, right?
So at our shows, you would see like, you know, you see the crust kids, like the gutter punks, and then some of the hardcore kids, and then you would have some of the Trojan and Sharp Skins come through, and you know, it was just, I grew up in that kind of scene. But then when I would go to a specific show, if you weren't supposed to be at that show, you were probably gonna get beat up or someone was gonna try to fight you, and so that's the divisive part, like, you know.
Yeah, that was especially prevalent at that time, I think, too. Like a lot of the you know, there was a lot of stimulants getting tossed around, and that was you know, you give stimulants to a bunch of, you know, teenage boys and young men, it's a brawl waiting to happen, you know, especially with loud music and like everybody's kind of publicly sanctioned to punch each other every once in a while. It's gonna escalate.
Yes, I always hated that. It was whack because it's like, I don't know, I was coming from a space where it's like, in my head I was like yeah, we're at the show, but like, you know, you're tough at the show, but in real life, this is, you know, you don't. So it was weird for me to see like this behavior at a space where it's supposed to be like, you know, we're just there to jump off the stage and have fun, and then all of a sudden it just became like people had cliques and people were making crews, and it was like, what? Yeah.
So that stuff never connected with you? You didn't do the team sports?
No, like we had a little like there was like too many things were happening. There's like the whole posse core thing, and then I don't know, it was just too much. Yeah, I like.
So are you still part of that scene, or I mean, have you kind of,
you know, one's a punk, always a punk, but
yeah. But I mean more like, do you still hang out with the guys from the back in the day, or have you
Not
kind
so
of drifted
much.
apart?
Yeah, I mean, like up here in San Francisco, we have the Black and Brown Punk Fest. So there's still things going, but it's kind of transitioned into like people I want to be aligned with. Whereas like back in the day, if it was a show and there was even like a bunch of boneheads and Nazi skins there, I probably would have went just to, like, oh, tonight's a show, maybe, like it's just, if there
Yep.
was a show, I was going to the show. But now it's more
Mhm.
of like, I'm older and spend my time and but there's a new band that I like, Zulu, that's out of LA right now, and like
Zoo?
there's a Zulu. So there's
Zulu.
like a
Okay,
bunch of
cool.
newer kids doing stuff that reminds me of like why I fell in love with the music.
Yeah.
So,
Can you name drop a few? We always make a playlist for every episode. So
yeah, I
If
like
you list a band right now, it'll end up on this playlist. So
yeah, Zulu. They just had an album come out on the 3rd, so 2 days ago. Soul Glow, they're out of Philly. I really like them.
very cool.
The Muslims, I like them.
I've heard of them.
yeah, I've heard of
Yeah.
that too.
So there's a lot of good stuff happening. There's a lot of good, like there's still a bunch of local, like that was my favorite part, like local backyard shows with bands that just no one knows them, but we know them and we love them. So
Yep. I've been in a lot of those bands.
yeah, so that excites
that's
me
great.
because I feel like the kids are kind of, we went through that phase where unfortunately like the scene I was coming up in got kind of shitty with all the fighting and like kids getting
Mhm.
stabbed and that kind of stuff. And now I feel like it's a little different, like back to how it should have been. Like it reminds me of the band where there was 4 different sets of punk in one band, and
Yeah.
we kind of were just like, well, we're little bridges to this entire scene, and I feel like all the kids are
Yeah.
kind of meshing together again.
Yeah, Toronto has kind of a similar thing going on right now. All the punk shows, there's just this like real intense energy, but like camaraderie too, like in a way that I remember. But again, I saw a similar thing here where there was like a community that formed, and we were all kind of like on the same page. We were all working together for the common goal of like, this is going to be our world. We got to start taking it seriously. Like things are going wrong. This is like when I started getting into like really into it, it was like around the time of 9/11. And like being a Canadian, it was like, we have to make sure that we don't just follow in America's footsteps. We have to have our own identity, and we have to, be the objective little brother. That's how we used to think about it. It's like, we have to have that sober kind of second look at things. And, and then things kind of fragmented again, and everybody started kind of infighting and arguing about, this wasn't even about the message. This was just the music, like it became about what is and isn't punk. And, when I got back into the scene, like as a musician, very cynical, a lot of, what have you done for me lately kind of attitude with people. And the venues and the musicians were now like this all the time. And that just created more and more problems. But now things seem to be kind of turning back around again, and there's an audience that's hungry for something real, in a way that has been lacking in past years, I think.
Yeah, everything's always, they say they're like cyclical about everything.
Mhm.
So I feel like comics is starting to do the same thing, where it's like,
Yeah,
you have more indie shows popping up, more Zine Fest. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's, the world's always kind of crappy, but I feel like these kids have something. Yeah, I do. I feel like the kids, I keep saying kids like they're really young, but they're not.
It's nice that we can realize that, though, because part of why we wanted to start a podcast about music and comics and stuff was to help push the kids that are making the new stuff. Like, because people are, like, I remember when, my parents were young adults and they would talk about like how there's no good music anymore. At that time, like, REM was doing some awesome stuff. Nirvana was about to pop on the scene. Like, there was good music out there if you were looking for it. And I think that I see that a lot in people my age, where they listen to the stuff that they grew up on, but there's no good music anymore. Music sucks now. Look at this, look at that. And me and Ben and our buddy John and other people are just like, there is good stuff. You just have to get out there and find it. And so I think it's nice that we can recognize that there are young people on the scene doing some really good stuff now.
Yeah, amazing, especially in comics.
Mm-hmm.
I think the comics for sure. I can speak to music a little bit, but I'm not. Like I said, family baby. I'm not out there
Sure.
like that, like I used to be. But
Yeah.
comics, this is our life. We're both cartoonists, and like there's so much great stuff being made.
Such a
And
diversity in ideas and everything. Like there's just so many. There's something for everybody now.
Yeah, there's like an explosion of talent happening, and like I think you know what I think might be part of this. I've been wondering about how much of an impact the 2008 crash had on creative development, because like I was 23 when it hit, I think, something like that, and or no, a little older than that, 24, 25. But when the crash hit, it's like my entire generation, and I'm pretty sure like people just before me as well, just like went into complete like stasis. We had just had to go into a holding pattern for a fair amount of time, and I think it resulted in a like a buildup of tension that never got resolved because we weren't able to express ourselves. We didn't have the money to spend on making comics or writing books or making music, making paintings, any of that stuff. Like we just had to survive for as long as we could, and then things started to turn around and started to look a little better until the last, I'd say, 8 years of politics when things started getting crazy again, and then the pandemic hit, and it's like this buildup. There's always a delay in like getting to this, like pulling the release valve. And now I think it's unstoppable now. And I think it's not just the young people. There's like 3 generations of people who have just felt stifled for so long, and we're all kind of in unison, like enough is enough. You can feel it in the air.
Yeah.
Have you noticed this?
I would hope. Yeah.
What's that?
I said that's what I would hope.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like I'm talking to people who are on the same. Like we're the 3 of us are like, yeah, we agree with this. But then like I'll meet someone, I was like, oh, maybe it was just us. Yeah. But, I do think there's enough of us that, like what you're saying, is like there's this kind of, it's just pouring out.
Yes.
And the pandemic, I will say the pandemic definitely, I don't know what it did to people, because I know none of us will ever be the same after that. Is impossible to be. But creatives in particular, even people who thought they weren't creative, kind of were like, well, I gotta do something. And like, I always wanted to play guitar, let me try out guitar. While like surviving this terrible thing I'm surviving and masking my pain, which we know music helps and comics helps. And I think we're seeing, like you're saying, the result of all these years of this collective buildup.
You make a good point though, talking about like how the isolation and the like natural kind of mental break that happens when you're pulled out of your comfort zone. Like I think we all, consciously or unconsciously, have all kind of agreed that it's like art saved the day. Like really what it is therapy at the end of the day. We all either indulged in someone else's or created our own or found an outlet, because this energy we have needs a place to go. And when it doesn't have somewhere to go, we have to like put it on a page or type it into words or, put it in kazoo form, whatever happens, there's, and I think that critical mass is starting to like kind of bring something cool. Like, I don't know, man, when the pandemic first hit, they said right after the plague comes the Renaissance, and I was like, whatever. Everybody wants everything to work the way it did in the past, but maybe maybe that's how it works. Who knows?
Like all of the local people that I used to go watch play music in the early 2000s, like they all just recently started releasing music again, like in the last couple of years coming out of the pandemic, and it's been pretty awesome. Like people that I used to go watch like weekly, like are just putting out project after project with different people, and like there's been an explosion for sure. Like, and people out of nowhere just popping up. I'm like, holy crap, I haven't heard you in 20 years. This is amazing. So I
Well,
definitely
it's 'cause you never know. Like I mean, some of us, like me personally, I always live like I don't know if I'll make it till tomorrow. Like that's just as a traumatic thing. That's how my mind works. But especially like after the pandemic, everyone's like, well, I don't know if I'll get to release that album. You know, we don't know what can happen, so let me try now. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
or there's people who might not have access to that. And my hope is to get to those people who's like, no, yeah, you can do this too. Like
Yeah.
this world is made up. Like it's just like you don't have to have permission. Like you're allowed to do things you want to do as long as you're not harming no one, and you know, hopefully you're not harming
Yeah.
yourself. But like, yeah, you don't know. Like we don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. So yeah, go make a shitty album. Who cares? And
Yeah.
like, do it, please do it. I want to listen to
Please.
it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed down like our general message for the podcast, which is like whatever you want to do, like we're here for you, man. Do it. Like we want to see it.
And just have
There's I
the mindset of like, I wanted to do this, so I did it. Not, oh, I want to do this and it needs to make X amount of money, or I want to do this and I
Yeah.
need to sell X amount, because you're gonna ruin yourself before you start.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just not realistic. You got the best thing in the world and people still might not like it. Like,
Yep.
it's just not, you know. So do it because you wanted to do it and you want to try it. And even if it doesn't work out, it's like it worked out because now, all right, now I know I actually needed 4 pages instead of 2. So let me do the next one. You know, like just try to take it step
Yes.
by step like that.
Totally.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, like, you know, I think part of the sickness of the time is that we have this sort of idea that creativity is a product that has to be like tangible and has to be given a value placement in the economy or whatever. But like I've always felt like everyone has a spark of genius, but you have to discover it, and you discover it by trying. And you just try the thing that resonates with you, and you know what it is. Everybody knows what it is. Like you chose comics, that means you're an artist and a storyteller. So you could have done anything within those realms, but comics was the thing you chose. You just knew it was you. And for me, I played saxophone. I had a guitar put in my hands when I was a little kid. I had guitar lessons. I'm a drummer, man. It's what I've always been. I was tapping up. My mom told me, it's crazy because I did all these other instruments. My mom told me a couple years ago, she's like, when you were 1 year old, you had the wooden spoons and the pots upside down on the kitchen floor. It was always in me, you know. I think, you know, we need to find that thing. We just need to discover it, and it doesn't have to have like a financial windfall at the end. Like, do you feel better when you're done? Good. It's worth it.
Yep. You don't have to capitalize on your mental health. Just get it out there and
Right.
get your head straight.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
So, what are the comics that brought you into this world, into this artistic realm?
Like, what are the ones like I read?
Like the ones that inspired you. Like when you saw them, you're like, "Oh shit, I got to try that."
It's funny. So I grew up on nothing but like Image comics,
Oh no shit.
Yeah.
I
but not
love
by
it.
choice.
Okay.
The comic shop. When my parents got divorced, we moved in with my aunt, and there's a comic shop down the street. And so I would go in there and try to get like, you know, Marvel, DC, but it's too expensive. But they had a 25-cent comic box, and the Image comics were in there because, you know, Image, they made so many comics in the 90s that they had like Bloodstrike, Newman, things like that. And so that's what I grew up on. simply because I could afford them.
Oh wow.
So all the comics I made were like these really buff, like
Like the
like
Rob Liefeld
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Prophet and what was that one? I can't remember all the names. They're ridiculous. Hunter Killer, I think it was. No. That was actually a cool one, I think.
So
I
all
can't
my
remember.
characters were knockoffs of their knockoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. It really worked.
That's great.
And that's what inspired me because I had never seen someone like Supreme. It's a ridiculous. It's like Superman to the max, but it was just ridiculous, and I was like, I can make something like this. And it was like I enjoy reading it, so let me try it. And uh, yeah, I just started making superhero comics, and then I got into alternative comics when I was in undergrad, like college, because it's all sophisticated and stuff. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that type of thing. Like everyone thinks I'm gonna say like oh yeah, I was reading Love and Rockets from the Stars. Like no, that came later. Like I grew up
Steelman
on
or
like
something like that.
yeah, like I grew up on these really like raunchy and gory knockoff Image comics.
Yeah. You read B comics. Right? Like nothing against old Image. Don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, that's where Spawn came
I enjoyed
from.
it in the
And
90s. Yeah.
yeah, and Savage Dragon, The
Yep.
Tick, like all that
Yep.
stuff came from that era, but it was also a lot of pockets and a lot of biceps on biceps on biceps.
So that inspired me. Ironically, like I make nothing like that, but that is my beginning of comics. I
Very
still
cool.
love it. Like I still have the stack. I still bust it out. I'm like, this is stupid, but I love it. Like some of it is really ridiculous. Like I think it's inspiring because it let me know that like, well, if they can put this out there, I can make whatever the hell I want to make.
Right.
Right.
That's what I always like. One of my biggest inspirations was Jeff Smith's Bone comics. And like it was like Lord of the Rings meets like Looney Tunes kind of like it was, and like if you could do that, like what couldn't you do? Like so
Yeah, true.
dig that.
Very
100%.
true.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna be wrapping up. Do you have any last words in terms of comics and mental health there, Lawrence?
Any shout outs?
Yeah, I'm doing a workshop with the Brooklyn Library. It's virtual, so anybody can come, but it's mental
Cool.
health comic workshop. And so we're gonna make like mental health comics. It's called
Awesome.
Everyone Can and Should Make Mental Health Comics.
Awesome.
Which will be my last point. Is like
Yeah.
get in the practice of if you want to make comics, just make them for yourself. As a therapeutic process, it's kind of like journaling, but I just happen like I draw, so I make mental health comics that aren't intended for like profit. They're not meant to show anybody. They're not meant to sell. It's just to kind of get my mind onto the page. And so comics is an excellent form for that type of thing. Yeah, and make what you want to make. I know we keep saying that, but like,
yeah,
if that's the takeaway, I think like we could all agree, like just make what you want to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all ended up here because of exactly that. Like even when the music thing was starting off in my mid-20s, when I started writing because I was legitimately losing my mind, or I thought I was. It felt like I was, and I just started like a live journal kind of thing, just as a way of like writing my ideas down on paper and then reading it back to me and seeing if they were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, it helped me kind of clarify my thoughts and kind of like cut out the noise that I've been kind of accumulating over time. And it really helped me get my head on straight and kind of like find my path. I would stop writing today and it would still feel like it was worthwhile. And I haven't made a cent off my writing,
Yeah.
The practice itself is worth something.
And you got you're doing a bit of a tour this year, right?
Yeah.
Throw out any of those or
Very cool.
We'll see how that goes. It's been a while, but yeah, we're starting with well, we have a bunch of local stuff here in the Bay, but we'll be at TCAF.
Nice.
We'll be at some other ones that we're not supposed to talk about, but we'll be outside of California this year for the first time in a while. So, but yeah, I'll be in Canada quite a bit. I might be in Vancouver for VanCaf, but we'll see.
Cool. Well, when you hit TCAF, I'll make sure I swing by your table.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a pleasure meeting you, man.
Yeah. This was a great conversation. I'm so glad to reconnect.
It's good. I was like, damn, am I gonna get on here and just ramble?
That's what we do.
That's my job.
Yeah.
But yeah, y'all made me feel welcome, and it's nice talking to people who, like, not too many people know about, like, when I start talking about that type of scene, and like, you know, like it was a very specific time.
Yeah,
that's true. Very magical time. Well, it looks like it's coming back though, so maybe I'll see you in a pit sometime.
Yeah.
We'll have to revisit it with our old broken bodies.
Yeah.
I'm wearing a stupid band now for tennis elbow, and I haven't listened to the racket since I was like 7. Getting old sucks.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Lawrence. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, you made it through an entire episode. Good for you. If you're looking for more, give the rest of the channel a look. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We'll catch you fuckers next time. Later.